You're a really interesting background. You served in 4 services as an officer. You've flown for 3 of them as a helicopter pilot. Um, I don't know. I mean, you received a DFC, the Distinguished Flying Cross. It's just what a crazy background. Let's start back at the beginning. Was any of your family in the service?
No, I don't come from a military family at all. My mom's uncles served in World War II. My one uncle was in the Navy. Um, what stories I could pull out of him? He was a gunner on convoys. He was doing those convoys across the Atlantic.
Mm.
And I think his claim to fame, he told me him and his gun crew shot down one of our own aircraft
Oh.
and had to eat shit from the pilot when they brought him. Because, he said, you can't tell and you're just getting attacked. And then, I remember that story. And then I had another uncle who was a paratrooper, but I don't know that he left the States because he was injured. He got shot on the range by somebody else by accident with an AD.
Wow.
But they did their time and then came home. But beyond that, no, my father was a lot older when I was, he was 66 when I was born, and this is back in 1961. So he came over to the United States, to the best that I could do the research, like in the 20s or early 30s. So he might have been in World War One. I as crazy as that sounds, but he died when I was 6, and I've tried to do some research, but it's been a lot tougher than you think, even with all the ancestry stuff and things like that. It's been a little tough. So I don't know a lot, but honestly, no, I don't. And as a comical note, my mom was a typical Jewish mom. She wanted a doctor or a lawyer, and I joke like I had no choice. The Marine Corps saved my life because it was either medical school or law school or the military. So the military saved my life. But yeah, I just always was interested in the military, honestly, from as far back as I can remember. And, as a listener of podcasts, I think a lot of the other folks have similar things. Some fell into the military by accident, but others like me just had a fascination with it from as far back as I can remember. There's even a picture of me with an airplane in the bathtub, I think, when I'm 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah, man.
I was fascinated with flying as far back as I could remember.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's how it's weird. I always find it interesting when people tell me why they joined. Some guys literally are like, the dress blues, man. It was the first recruiter, or they were the only recruiter that wasn't at lunch, but I'm on the side that, like you're talking about. I was fascinated as a little kid. I remember having a plastic like C-130. It was like a bigger one I'd gotten for Christmas one year. And I would put all my little green army men in like, in formation, they'd be all covered and aligned and stuff. And then I'd march them into the C-130 and play, I was like same way. It wasn't a surprise. I don't think to my parents, like, when I joined, it looked like it was going to happen. Did you make it aware, that it was something you were interested in?
Yeah. And I think my mom hoped I would grow out of it. And like you talked about earlier with social media, as I reconnected with friends from like elementary school and junior high, even high school, they remember me sitting in the back drawing like airplanes and dogfights. And, by the time I was 9, I could tell you every World War II aircraft and things like that. So I made it known, my mom hoped I'd grow out of it, but then she got on board, pretty quickly when she realized I wouldn't. And I can tell you the exact moment I decided I was going to be a Marine. I mean, it's very cliche, but I saw the sands of Iwo Jima when I was about 9 years old, man.
Classic.
And, I just watched it the other day, as a matter of fact, but the scene at the end, I've obviously seen it a bunch of times, but there's a scene at the end, John Wayne gets killed, right? They read the letter to his son, and then John Agar, the famous actor, the guy who he was always butting heads with, all of a sudden he goes, all right, let's get back in the war. And then they start going down the hill from Suribachi and cue the smoke in the Marine Corps hymn. And I remember like I was 9 years old. I was like, I don't know who these guys are, but I think that's me, and from that point on, I started reading on the Marine Corps And then I realized you could be a Marine aviator, and that kind of became my focus from that point on.
Yeah, that's a classic movie. I mean, it's, as an adult you watch it, or as a modern person you watch it, you're like, okay, it's obviously a lot of fake, but at the time, really good movie. And I think it also has some of the guys that were the flag raisers in the movie, right?
Right. And then some of the leadership, that were actually there leading, the company that went up Suribachi and things like that. He has a cameo. I think he was a captain at the time, has a cameo in the film. And a couple of the flag raisers reenacted it, who were, I think three or four of them got killed, on the island or later. So there's only 3 left. I mean, if you watch Flags of Our Fathers, and I read about it, there's only 3 or 4 of them left.
Yeah.
At the end of the war. And, I mean, it's a great classic movie, and I don't think I'm the first guy who wanted to join the Marine Corps after seeing that movie. I mean, it's a pretty solid recruiting tool for the Marine Corps.
For sure. I mean, classic war movies those are the best. I really enjoy like Midway or The Great Escape. I watched that not too long ago.
The Great Escape is amazing because I'm a movie freak, and it has so many great actors. Just watched The Bridge Too Far the other day.
A Dirty Dozen. We just watched that not too long ago also. It's just classic. Again, obviously you could tell a lot of it's cheesy, kind of fake, but it's, it was good at the time. But the, I don't know, it's just classic war movies. I don't know, they're really good. Dirty Dozens, everybody's got to see Dirty Dozen. That's just
Dirty Dozen's great. Great Escape's great. Longest Day's good. I took a solo trip to Normandy in the fall.
Oh, wow.
And then so I watched it again. And I was like, okay, I was there, it kind of makes it more, because they filmed The Longest Day at most of the places that the events took place.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then just going to all the places that I've read about my whole life, because I've been a World War II buff and military freak, like I said, since I was a kid. Going there and seeing those places, standing on Omaha, at the water's edge. And it was even high tide. But I stand at the water's edge and looking at, just several hundred yards of open field, which then leads up to some elevated terrain. And the Germans had interlocking fields of fire, everything. And you're just like, I don't know how these guys did it. Or go to Point du Hoc and just some of the other, or Pegasus Bridge, just all of it, you're just in awe. Even having been in combat myself, it almost makes it more awesome. And you realize what the problems these guys had to overcome. And you're just like, I don't know how these guys did it. Don't.
What an awesome opportunity, man. I think that's like a bucket listing for me. I'd like to go there, and I'd like to go to Bellau Wood and get water out of the fountain.
I did that too. Got a picture of it. I should have sent you that. I did that too. I mean,
send it to me. I'll throw it in the video.
Yeah. I've been planning this trip, and I just recently finalized the divorce, and I was like, what? There's no reason for me not to go. Like I have the time off from work because I work 14 on, 14 off.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I've been talking about it. Kind of my buddy who's half French that I grew up with. He was like, dude, just take the trip, and I just booked it and took it. I went for a week, spent about 3 days in that part of France, and then spent a couple of days in Paris. And I've been there before, but it was just kind of cool. It's a good experience, really was. And Bellau Wood is also an amazing place. I mean, and it's just so cool the way they have it set up. It's hard to explain. It's so understated. Like you just roll up in a car and there's this little office with these 2 very nice French ladies in it. You just go in and say, hey, I'm a Marine. I'd like to see the fountain. And then while you're there, some other guy wanders in, with his wife that he's on. Hey, I'm a Marine. It's like not formalized. It's not, you don't do tours. You just show up and they open the gate and they walk you to the fountain. And usually it's, hey, will you take a picture of me? Yeah. And then you take a picture of them and drinking from the fountain or whatever. And it's just really cool in its understated way. It was a really awesome experience. It really was. And, I'd recommend any Marine do it if he can, but just anybody who's got a desire to learn about military history to go see these places, because it's pretty awesome. And when you visit the cemeteries, you realize we've we spilled a lot of blood in Europe in the 20th century between both wars. So
yeah, for sure.
Pretty humbling. I'm really glad I took that trip, though. It was an awesome trip.
That's one of those things, man. I mean, I used to say it a lot at the beginning of the podcast, because when this started, the podcast started with me taking a 2-week road trip cross country. Well, not all the way across. I drove to Indiana and back from California. But along the way, I stopped and recorded the first episodes of the podcast. And I did what you're talking about, like all these places I'd heard of, read in history books, read about in school. Like, you know, I wanted to go see it. You know, I went to Yellowstone. I went and saw, I don't know, I went up to Sonoma Coast. I went to Nashville. I saw where MLK was assassinated. I went out to, you know, all these places. But the point is you have to recognize that opportunity and seize it, because you don't get too many of those opportunities to go, hey, man, I got the time and I got the resources to make this once in a lifetime thing happen. So I got to do it, you know, and that's one of those, like what you're saying is one of those things.
Well, I mean, you know, it goes back to the experience. You know, I've survived 2 wars and cancer subsequent. So you're just like, I'm not gonna waste time. You know, it gives you a little bit more of a perspective to go, you know what, I need to go do this or I'm never going to get it done. Mm-hmm. And I'll just add that taking a trip to France, well, I did it by myself. It wasn't super expensive. And I didn't stay in like hostels or anything. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm 61 years old. You know, I'm not staying in a youth hostel. You know what I mean? But I stayed in hotels and I stayed in, you know, pretty decent places. I went maybe in the off season, but it's not something that's out of reach financially for the average person. You know what I mean? So I would encourage, you know, any veteran who wants to see something like that, or anybody who just wants to see the country. I've seen a lot of places, and there's so many places on my bucket list in the United States that I haven't been to yet. Mm-hmm. You know, Little Bighorn's a huge.
I went there.
Yeah, I just really want to go there and just try to visualize. I've read so much on that battle.
It's crazy, dude. It's you see like they have a marker at the hill where most of the soldiers died. They have like the monument, and then there's fences up, and there's little tombstones everywhere that has the name of where the person that died, and it's in the spot that they died at. So there's little tombstones everywhere, and it's both the cavalry guys and the Native Americans. And then you can take a vehicle tour where you drive kind of around the battlefield. You can't really get out in those places. There's a couple spots where you can stop and get out, but it's not like an old Civil War battlefield where you can just walk across it and, you know, be in the nature of it. But you could drive and you just see these rolling hills, and it's like, man, they were working the horses through these hills to, you know, hide their movements and stuff. It's so crazy. But Same way, I wanted to go see that. When I left Yellowstone, there's kind of like a trail. When you leave Yellowstone, it goes from there to Little Bighorn and then to Mount Rushmore. And you'll see like it's like an RV trail basically of people hitting that up. So that's what I did. I went to Yellowstone. I went to Little Bighorn, and then I hit Mount Rushmore. And I had planned on camping, but it was gonna storm, so I ended up getting like this crappy hotel up there, but like took it all in, you know, like this old mining town. I drove through Sturgis, and yeah, man, you got it. More people need to do stuff like that, you know. And that's the stuff I think about when I hear someone say, you know, Americans have no culture. There's no culture in America. And there's no this. And it's like, dude, we have so much history that we just disregard because it's not like right in front of us, or, you know, like we forgot about it. Like people forget about it.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to jump in the beauty of America. You just jump in your car. Like I'm planning a trip where I'm just going to, not even really plan it. Just I'm going to get around and do it one of these next few weeks. Probably wait till it gets a little warmer, and I'm just going to jump in the car when I get home from work and hit the road for 2 weeks till I come back. I'm thinking about just driving up the coast, the west, you know, the PCH up to maybe Vancouver, and go across into Canada, chill out Vancouver, and then drive back. You know, something like that.
That'd be legit, man.
That
would be legit. Let's transition back to your military. What year did you end up joining the Marines, and how did that, I mean, you became an officer, so, you know, what did you study in school and stuff?
So getting back to what I said, So I kind of fixated. I wanted to be a Marine aviator and focused on that. Let's say from the time I was about 12 or 13, that was pretty much what I wanted to do. So, but it was not an easy path because I wasn't a good kid. So while I had this sort of lofty dream, I was also, I grew up single mom in New York City. She was working 2 jobs, trying to keep a roof over our head. And I wasn't doing her any favors. Let's put it that way. I had a little bit of artistic talent. So I got into an art high school called the High School of Art and Design in New York City, which is pretty solid school. But I was always on the fence. So I got in a little trouble, did some things. And how can I say this? I wasn't aware of making a good impression would be the best way I could put this. So I get to college, I go to Embry-Riddle for a semester and promptly flunk out with like a 1.8 GPA, like an Animal House GPA, because I'm on the beach. I'm not mature enough to balance going to school and hanging out. All my friends from New York are like, oh shit, we got a free place to stay in Florida. So they're coming down to hang out with me. I was flying, so I did get the flying. I solidified that, yes, I do want to be a pilot. I love this. This is the most amazing thing in the world. But again, mentally, I wasn't saying, well, if you want to do this, you actually have to graduate. You actually have to, And so I failed out of that, came home, went to City College, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, which I don't know if it's still free, but back then the City University of New York was free at the various colleges, right? So I go there, and that's when I make my first attempt to join the Marine Corps, right? So I go down to the officer selection office, and I'm being honest, I think I was wearing a wife beater. Like, I walk in there and my New York accent's pretty bad, but it was worse. I'm like, hey, how you doing? I want to be a Marine officer, blah, 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 and there's this colonel there. I think his name was Bausch. Like I said, I've told this story before and I wish I could remember it, but he was a Mustang lieutenant colonel. I didn't know anything about that then, but, looking back on it. And after a few minutes of looking at me, he basically says, look, I'm not recommending you for this program. He goes, you're not giving me the impression of somebody that's going to be an officer in the United States Marine Corps. I didn't even know what he was talking about, and he basically said, look, I'll paraphrase. He goes, look, you got 2 choices. You can join the Marine Corps, the reserves while you're in college, which I recommend. Go down to Paris Island or San Diego and get your shit together, or you can come back in a year and show me that you are the type of person that I should accept into this program and figure it out. Like, he goes, but you don't make a very good first impression. Matter of fact, you make a pretty crappy one. So with a lot of things that you think is the end of the world, which I saw all my dreams crumbling before my eyes, it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because now I had to learn how to make a first impression, how to give a positive first impression. And this was before the internet. So I had to learn, well, how do you want to dress to make a first impression? How do you want to deal with people? How do you shake hands and look someone in the eyes? All those things that constitute a good interview or making a good first impression, I had to now research through either family, friends of my mom's, people I'd known who were in the military, the library, whatever. And I spent the next year doing it and went back the next year. By that time, I transferred to State University of New York at Stony Brook, which was a little bit better school. It was out on Long Island. I was actually playing Division III football. I realized that I'd done well at John Jay. My grades were good enough to get to an even better state school. And I kind of realized that I have to do some performing. I had to perform academically to be able to achieve my goal. That light bulb had finally went off. And then I went the next year and was accepted into the Marine Corps Officer Program, the Platoon Leaders Class program, which is still around today. I think it's one of the greatest officer avenues to becoming an officer in the military there is, because they don't ask a whole lot of you, right? You get accepted to the program. If you pass your flight physical and pass the test to see if you have the aptitude to be an aviator, you get a guaranteed air contract, right? Which guarantees you that when you're commissioned a Marine officer after the basic school, you'll go to flight school. Now, this is where I made another serious mistake in judgment. The program either allows you the opportunity to do one 10-week program down at Quantico, or you can do 2 6-weeks that you can divide over 2 summers, right? Me being a stupid moron who wants to still go to the beach and do those kind of things, I'm thinking, well, I'll have half the summer, right? So let me just do this 6 weeks, and then I'll half the summer, and then I'll do it again. Well, imagine going to boot camp twice, right?
Yeah.
Imagine getting off the bus at reception at Paris Island and having to do that another time a year later, right? So interestingly enough, I've helped several people get into that officer program. And the number one piece of advice I give is do the 10-week program. Do not do the 2 6-week programs. That first summer, 6 of us went. The second summer, only me and another guy showed back up.
I was going to say that probably thins the numbers out. Just the dude sitting in their bed at night going, fuck that. I am not going back.
So the day before I was supposed to leave, I was on the back of my friend's bike in New York City. We're driving. I remember this like it was yesterday. We stop at a stoplight. I'm on the back of his bike, just agonizing over having to go back. And I just lean over and throw up. But I had talked so much shit about being a Marine to all my friends and anybody who would listen that luckily I boxed myself into the corner of not being able to quit. Because believe me, I wanted to. I did not want to go back. But I did and successfully completed it. I wasn't stellar, but I made it through OCS. Got my commission in 1984 and went to the basic school where all new Marine lieutenants go. About a week from graduation, they call us. We just finished the 3-day war, which is the culminating event there. And they call us in O'Bannon Hall, which is a big auditorium, and I'm paraphrasing. They go, hey, guys, for you aviators, it sucks to be you. The Marine Corps has too many pilots at both ends of the pipeline, right? We just got too many. So here are your options. You can drop your air contract. We'll give you any MOS you want, regardless of your class standing. Or if you want to still go to flight school, it's going to be 18 to 24 months, and we're going to just stick you where we need you in the meantime, where we're short lieutenants. You can fill out a dream sheet, but, basically you're going to get stuck where we need you now. Few of the top guys in the class, they got to go to infantry or some other things. Those of us who were in the middle, I got orders to the 7th Truck Battalion, Camp Pendleton, California, right? So that's where I'm going. And I got my orders. And then one of the lieutenants in my class, his dad was a Navy admiral at NAVAIR. And NAVAIR encompasses encompasses naval aviation, Marine Corps aviation, and Coast Guard aviation, right? Because it's all under naval aviation. So he walks over to his Marine counterpart and goes, hey, what's going on? And they say, hey, and the Navy goes, well, hey, we're short pilots. Can maybe some of these Marine lieutenants, you think they'd want to come over and be Navy pilots? And the Admiral goes, let's see if we can make it happen. And long story short, they offered us the opportunity to swap to the Navy to get to flight school. And I had drank the Marine Corps Kool-Aid. I mean, the Marine Corps is everything I wanted it to be. And even though I wasn't a stellar Marine, I liked it. And I really, but you're looking at 18 to 24 months, but like if you're medical, you have a medical issue or anything, there's just all these variables. And then they're like, well, you can get to Pensacola as soon as the paperwork's done. I waited. It was a tough decision, but me and about, I want to say another 150 Marine lieutenants decided to swap to the Navy to get to flight school. And
that's not surprising, I don't think. I think
it's going on right now. I mean, it's a sine wave where in aviation, there's too many. And a couple of the guys ended up swapping back to the Marine Corps later because obviously the thing reversed itself. So, it was after I got out of the Navy initially, but yeah, a couple of guys I know actually ended up going back to the Marine Corps because that cycle, just it's cyclical and it's still going on today. But
so when you switched, so you had finished TBS and all that stuff already?
Yep. Graduated TBS. I had a platoon. I was put in the H&S company, in charge of the guys who basically fixed the rifle ranges and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
It was a pretty motley collection of guys who were blind, crippled, crazy, waiting discharge on drug this. And it wasn't your stellar Marines who went to that unit. So for a new lieutenant, it was kind of, for that short period of time, was a really good leadership thing, because I had guys salute me with their left hand, and just treating a second lieutenant like a second lieutenant. And I learned about, when to be a dick, for lack of a better term, and when to just not walk around like with a swagger stick. And I'll tell you a great second lieutenant story. You'll appreciate this. Most enlisted guys love this story, but I had the duty, right? And as a lieutenant, I had the base duty. So I had to follow a major around who I had to shadow a major around who had the base duty officer deal for that night, right? So I have to be in alphas. I'm under arms, and we're going around checking the brig, checking this, checking that. We finally get to check. We have to check the chow in the chow hall, and it's Midrats, right? And at Quantico, you have HMX1 and a lot. So the chow was pretty crowded at Midrats, right? So we get out of the vehicle. I'm checking my gig line. My 45s on my hip. Back then we're still rolling with the 45s. I put my cover on. I'm making sure everything's good. I go into the chow hall. It's packed. And I'm walking around. I'm trying to, as a new lieutenant, you emulate the leaders, just like an NCO does. You emulate the ones that you admire, right? So you start to try to take on their mannerisms and things like that. So I'm in there. And I'm walking around, I'm looking at the Marines going, how you doing, Devil Dog? What's going on? How are you? And I'm noticing everybody's kind of looking at me with a smirk on their face, right? I'm like, why is everybody looking at me? I'm checking. I'm like, I think I'm squared away. I don't think I'm screwed up, right? And I'm like walking around, hey, Marine, how's the chow? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, fine, sir, trying not to laugh. Finally, some Marine, and I remember he had mechanics coveralls on. He goes, hey, sir, can I talk to you for a minute? Right? And I'm trying to be cool. I'm like, what you got, Devil Dog? And he goes, hey, sir, your cover's on backwards.
Oh.
So I'd been in there with my cover on backwards, walking around for like 4 or 5 minutes like a clown. But,
that's fun.
That's good stuff. I mean,
that's crazy. You had to wear alphas. You had to wear alphas on duty?
Yeah, if you had that duty, yeah.
That's lame.
The best is I went to the major, and he was standing there with some staff sergeant. They're laughing. I'm, sir, did you know I had it on backwards? He goes, you goddamn right I didn't. I wasn't gonna say shit. It was the most fun he'd had that night.
That's funny. For those that don't know what Midrats is, that's the midnight meal. That's the evening time, because in the aviation side of the military, they're working 24 hours flying and maintaining. The maintainers are up all night. So they have it's like their lunch, I guess. Is that Midrats is like the lunch for the night crew?
Yeah, I mean, if they're working 12s for sure. If they're working 3/8s, it's just either that or the end of the shift for the 4 to midnight guys and the start of the shift for the other guys.
Shout out to the aircraft maintainers, man. When we were on the MEU, those were the only dudes working. Guys and girls were out there fucking grinding.
No matter what branch of the military, man, the wrench turners are working hard all the time.
I hated being a mechanic, and I can't imagine the multiple level, because I was working on Humvees and 7-tons and stuff.
But even that, like, those things, they get the shit beat out of them constantly. And they have to be maintained.
Yeah, but if something messes up on it, it doesn't crash into the ground and burn. It's like a different level of stress, I think, for the guy that has to like finally check off on it.
I mean, I've flown in, I've done, I'm getting a little ahead, but some of the Medevacs I've done have been in those situations where guys are trying to recover a vehicle, IEDs, yada, yada, yada. People get hurt. That's why we're out there. So, I mean, it's, maintain, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so many jobs in the military that, they're not making the news and they're not cool and they're not this, but nothing gets done if that job doesn't get done.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's, I guess it's important for people to realize that. I mean, I got lucky. I had a very cool job. And that's why I like this podcast, because it's called Former Action Guy. You know, I could sit there because one of the things I joke about is I'm like, yeah, I'll never be as cool as I was back in the day.
No,
you know
man.
what I mean? But
going TAD to exotic locations, you know, it's like
I lived in the Philippines for 3 years, 4 years. So yeah, I've got to go to some pretty cool places, man.
I always tell people, I was like, you know, like being a JTAC and being an evaluator, I got to travel a bunch to go work with the other JTACs and work with different squadrons. It's like being a ghetto rock star. You're not really going anywhere you want to go. You know, you're going to like Yuma. You're going to like some.
Worked in Yuma for 3 years, man. I just finished as an EMS pilot.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah.
Yuma very well.
Yuma over in the Chocolate Mountains over there, man, it gets hot on the ground. It's hot.
29 stumps.
Gila Bend. Yeah. So, but you get to stay in hotels and stuff like that, but it's, I don't know. The travel's fun, but when you swapped over, did you have to do any kind of like naval specific training?
This is how it went. Literally, we got our DD-214s from the Marine Corps, right? Literally, as a formation, sidestepped over one step and were sworn in the Navy as ensigns, right?
Wow.
We had to buy some new uniforms. Some guys let their hair grow a little more, and that was the end of that. Because, I mean, in essence, we're naval. A Marine Corps officer is a naval officer. He understands naval terms. He's, you know, he use terms like deck, bulkhead. You know,
there's some naval officers scoffing at that comment, sir.
Like, there might be, but and the beauty of the Marine Corps is, and you see it now, if you go from the Marine Corps to anywhere else, there's no initial training required, right? But if I'm an ex-sailor or an ex-soldier, I still got to go to Marine Corps boot camp, because the DOD or the military recognizes that for initial training, there is no more better comprehensive introduction to the military than the Marine Corps. I mean, there's a lot of things you can complain about. The Marine Corps does a very good job of taking your average Joe off the street and making him into a Marine, right? Taking guys from a very diverse backgrounds and just breaking them down to nothing so that they come out this product at the other end, your basic Marine, right? Officer candidate school is a little different in that there is a attrition rate there, a little more significant. You guys can drop out, or you could be kicked to the curb. It didn't happen super often, but there were guys who were just found to not be able to cut it as a leader and as a potential leader in the Marine Corps, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an attrition rate there, and the number, you know. This is from an NCO going through with me. He said the main difference is the PT's a lot harder and they don't beat the shit out of you as much. This, you know, this is 1981. And that's because I asked him, I said, what's the main difference? He goes, the PT's a lot harder and they don't beat the shit out of you as much.
I've heard that too. I've heard the running in OCS is pretty next level, you know.
It's a lead by, you know, again, I'm very thankful I grew up in the Marine Corps in terms of my military experience. It is a lead by, if you're going to be an officer in the Marine Corps, there are certain expectations for you to meet in terms of leading by example. And the Army and the Navy do it to an extent. The Air Force, maybe not so much, just because of the amount of leadership you're going to get as an Air Force officer. But the Marine Corps especially, you know, you can't be a shitty guy at PT. You can't have like a 240, 230, whatever the minimum passing score is on the PT test these days, right? And be an officer. You got to be a 280 to 300 guy, because if you're an infantry platoon leader and you're struggling through everything, your men are not going to respect you. They're not going to respect you. They're not going to trust your leadership. They're just not. So they're expecting you to be as much of a stud as you can be, or at least, you know, when you guys are out running, you don't quit. You're not the guy who, you know, an officer can't fall out of a run, you know, and the Army's the same way. That that's like a huge black mark against you as a leader.
Man, you know? Imagine if you're an officer and you fall out of like a battalion run or something like that.
You can't. It's just impossible. So, and so the Marine Corps is very, very good at that. You know, I'll tell you, I spent a relatively short time in the Marine Corps, but it was a seminal experience in my life. The further I get away from it, the more I appreciate it. And I realized what a transformative experience it was for me in a positive way. Any little success I've had in the military, and believe me, I've had a very highly undistinguished military career, but whatever little success I've had is due to the principles and values instilled in me by the Marine Corps. And I believe that. And it's just an amazing organization, you know, and like I said, I've done some cool things, but among the many great accomplishments in my life is earning the title Marine, you know, and being able to say I'm a Marine, you know, and I feel ashamed sometimes, you know, when I talk to guys who spent, you know, X amount of time in the green zone, some of our customers, because we did a lot of work with the Marine Corps in Afghanistan, you know, when I was in Air Force Rescue. You know, it's a great experience, and it was a great stepping stone for me to be able to be effective as an officer and a leader to even a minor extent. When I went, certainly in the Navy, it was helpful, but even when I was in the Army Guard and when I was in the Air Force, just the ability to just the things I was taught, the ability to handle some pressure and the ability to just know how to take care of your people, which is the Marine Corps is so good at, and it was so important later in my career where I was able to take care of people and take ownership of the people that work for me and be able to run interference for them from time to time, which isn't something that's always taught in the Air Force. I'm not slamming the Air Force. It's just very different because you don't have that many people to be in charge of most of the time until you get up to 04, 05 rank, where everywhere else in the military, Marine Corps, Army, Navy, you're going to have anywhere from 10 to 30 people as a very junior officer that you're in charge of and responsible for. So it taught me a lot about being a good, effective leader. You know, I'm not saying I was a great leader, but, you know, whatever I did do
good enough
from the stuff I learned in the Marine Corps.
That's good, man. I mean, I think everybody nobody's gonna, I guess, all Marines are kind of have a feeling like that, you know, or most do. I think you come out with like a kind of a sense of pride of being able to do that and stuff. When you went to flight school, what were the options available to you? Like different platforms? Like what did you learn on? So now for people that don't know, you go and it's needs of the military. So you go and you do your initial training and then you go specialized training, but it's based on the needs of the military.
So here's how Navy flight school works, right? Other guys can talk to you about Army. I mean, I know the basics of the others, but Navy flight school, you go to what's called primary flight training, right? And that's in the T-34C turbomentor. Now it's been replaced by the T-6, but is a single engine turboprop aircraft, really beautiful aircraft. And you do your primary flight training in that. When you complete that, you pick your choices. And back then it was jets, props, helos, right? Those are your three choices, right? Grades and needs of the Navy are the biggest factors on whether you get what you want or not, right? And then your preferences, number three, right? Well, I had already made the decision that I thought I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. You know, I didn't love aerobatics. You know, it was okay, but I wasn't in love with it. And I never was like, I want to be a fighter pilot. You know, I wanted to be a pilot, and I liked a lot of the odd aircraft, like the OV-10 and stuff. So, but, you know, I grew up with literally Vietnam in my living room, you know, as a kid. And it's all Hueys all day, every day. You know what I mean? And I just became fascinated with helicopters. So on my dream sheet, I actually put helos, helos, helos. I didn't put anything else. And a lot of guys didn't want helos. So pretty much I was going to get it. You know what I mean? It just wasn't, there was like talk of some sort of quality spread where they may send some guys with medium grades to jets just so they could do a study on their success rate or something. But I put helos, helos, helos. I got helos. In Whiting Field, where you do some of your initial training in Pensacola. The north side of the airfield is where they do the helo training. So I didn't even have to PCS. I just drove to another building the next day at work and started learning to fly helos. And, you know, it wasn't easy for me. I'm a bit of a rock, and you know, some guys breeze through those programs. Other guys, they struggle a little more. And I probably was in that latter category. And, but I graduated in August of 86, flew CH-53Es, which I wanted to fly in the Marine Corps anyway. So it was kind of cool. We didn't do mine sweeping. We just did, we were basically trash haulers, just like in the Marine, you know, same mission, a little less tactical, but same mission, hauling trash. And got stationed in the Philippines and was in the Philippines for about 2.5 years. And then they decided to take the 53s out of there. So then I came back to Norfolk, Virginia, and flew in a unit, HC-2 there until my time in the Navy was up. And then I thought I'd have my second, you know, when I married my wife, I adopted her daughter who became my daughter. And then we had a child together. And I just thought maybe I wanted to go to the corporate world and, you know, just not be gone and things like that. I got a couple of shorter deployments, but got out, went home to New York, started working in the corporate world. Lasted about 2 months there before I realized I hated it. Shotgunned all my paperwork out to all these Guard and Reserve units, Marine Reserve, helicopter units, Air National Guard, Army Guard. And the Army Guard just came back first with the paperwork. So I went about 1.5 years after getting out of the Navy. I went from being an O3 to a W2 in the Army Guard flying Hueys, which was honestly a blast. And then I started working in the theater business in the box office on Broadway, selling Broadway theater tickets, which was a really good job. It's a union job, making a fair amount of dough, so no complaints there. But started flying in the Army Guard, flew Hueys, did that for about 4.5 years. You know, would leave work at 2 because I got done at 2 in the afternoon, drive out to Long Island, do a drill. You know, you get additional flight training periods, try to fly a little bit, then come home, tried to fly as much as I could. And then an opening came available in the Air Guard Rescue Unit out on Long Island. And shockingly, I applied and was accepted. I didn't expect to because no one ever could get into that unit, right? Mm-hmm. And it was just, you know, and a lot of the guys listening who've been in the Guard and Reserves know this, like, there is no more bastion of nepotism than a Guard or Reserve unit in the United States military. Like, so many of the people have the same last names. It's not even funny.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they're hard to get into. There's a lot of good old boy stuff to get into them. And you got to schmooze a little bit and bring donuts and, you know, kind of, especially, you know, if you want to be a pilot or get a flight slot or this, that, and the other. And I'm not slamming it. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not good or bad. It's just the way it is. And I got into this Air Guard unit, flying the HH-60 Pave Hawk, went back to being a captain, being an O3, and was in there about 1.5 years. I was doing my in-house training, and they said, hey, there's a slot at the schoolhouse. Can you go? And I was able to tell my boss, hey, you got to let me go to this school for 4 months. Plus, you can't fire me. But he was my friend, so it didn't matter. But I mean, and I was there in the schoolhouse for the HH-60, and a couple of the other pilots going through it, the active duty guys were like, man, they're hurting for pilots in the Air Force. We didn't train helo pilots for a long time. There was a lot of ex-Army guys going through the course and been Army pilots. And just so happens the assignments guy, the guy who does assignments for Air Force helo pilots, was there visiting. So I grabbed the guy in the hallway and I was like, hey, if I wanted to come on active duty, what would I have to do? And he's like, did your unit pay for you to go to flight school? I'm like, no, I came over from, you know, the Army and Navy and blah, blah, blah. I told my story. He goes, yeah, just put in a request. And if your boss signs off on it, I'll bring you on board for 2-year orders. So fast forward, got 2-year orders. And then I found I was eligible for the bonus. And I was like, oh, let me, not really thinking it through. I was like, yeah, let me take the bonus, right? And that would have got me to like 13 years, right? total active duty. Then I don't realize this. I'm now up for promotion to major, but I have like 3 months as a captain in the Air Force, right? And so I get passed over, right? And I'm like, oh man, this is no good. And because pretty much once you get passed over once, it's not going to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Very rare. So I'm like, oh man, now I got to figure out a way to stay to 20 because I'm committed to 13 because I took the money. And about a year and a half later, I'm assigned to the 66 Rescue here in Vegas at Nellis Air Force Base. They're hurting for pilots, so they come out with a thing saying, hey, if you're a captain and you sign, we'll retain you to 20, which is pretty unusual. So I'm like, all right, let me do that because I'm going to stay. And then the war happens, right? 9/11 happens. I wake up. My wife had back surgery. I'm on leave for a couple of days. I wake up. I see it. Now, my brother works at the World Trade Center, and I worked there in the summers as a clerk because my brother was a commodities trader on the commodities floor. And in college, I worked for him as a clerk. By the way, that ruined my go to the beach plans from PLC because I had to go to work. So I just ended up coming back from the Marines and going to work. But I'm like, so I'm watching this and I'm like, and everybody's going, oh, a small plane hit. And I'm thinking that's a pretty big hole for a small plane. And they're like, oh, he must have hit it by accident. I'm like, it's clear blue in a million. How did this guy run in? I'm just perplexed by the whole thing. And I see the other aircraft on the screen. I'm like, what's going on? That's low. And I go, oh shit, boom. And I know it, right? I'm like, okay. Tell my wife, hey, I got to go into work. I tell her what happened. She turns on the news. She goes, I'm keeping the kids home from school. I said, I got to try to get into work. Took me about 4 hours on a normally 30-minute trip because they went to, the gate. They weren't letting aircraft in the gate. I mean, cars in the gate and, that whole chaotic mess.
All bases went secure when that happened, right?
So I get in while I'm sitting there in the traffic waiting to get in, the towers collapse. And I'm like, oh shit. I remember the thought because I was so in compartmentalized mode at that point. I was like, oh, I think my brother's dead. All right, I'll have to figure out how to tell mom later. You know what I mean? But luckily he called me an hour later, called my kids, and then they called me. So he was okay. But he survived both bombings, my brother, the one in 93 and 9/11.
People forget about that 93 bombing.
Yeah. And so then the war happens, and my bosses at the time were both real aggressive meat eater dudes from the special operations community who were given command in the rescue community. And they got us into the war, and we ended up in our first group of guys deployed to Pakistan in actually November of 2001. And then I rolled in Afghanistan in mid-January of 2002, was there till April. That's where I flew in Anaconda and that.
That's crazy, man. Being that early on, like, let's you just went through a ton of your career. I want to ask a couple questions here. One, you flew a bunch of different aircraft models from fixed wing. What was the trainer that you went through? The what?
T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentor.
What was your favorite to fly out of everything you've flown?
I mean, in the big scheme of things, the Hawk, because I went to war with the Hawk. I mean, that's the aircraft I became really proficient with. It's a really nice aircraft. The HH-60 Pavehawk, which is just a variant of the Black Hawk. We just got the refuel and probe, the radar, all this gadgetry to try to hopefully help us survive in a medium threat environment, because our main job is to go in and rescue that downed pilot who's been shot down behind enemy lines. So that's the reason for our existence. So they modified the aircraft to try to help us do that. But I love the 53E. I love flying the Huey, because that's a classic. It was, it's an iconic aircraft, and I got, about 500 hours in that. I don't think there was an aircraft I didn't like. I think the Hawk was my favorite because it was the aircraft I got to do my mission in combat with, and really, had to be good so that I could be here sitting with you today and having this discussion, and instead of, the alternative.
Now,
so
out of all of those, the 53 is the fastest, isn't it?
Yeah, the 53E is
People don't realize that.
So the 53E I love because people have go, oh, the Chinook is the most powerful aircraft in the world, and I'm like, in the free. I'm like, actually, it's not. Right, like the 53E, we can outlift, outfly, and pretty much do everything that a normal Chinook can, and by orders of magnitude better. Right now, some of the modified ones that like the 160th uses and things, they've obviously got some capabilities that we didn't have. But your basic Chinook versus an Echo, there's no comparison. We can lift more, we're faster, we're more maneuverable, we can carry more troops. So I used to love when people would talk about the Chinook, and I'd just be able to shut that down because it's a really amazing aircraft. And this new Kilo version they're coming out with is probably going to be an amazing aircraft too. I mean, I lifted 18,000 pound bulldozers up to like 8,000 feet in the Philippines for hurricane relief. I've done a bunch of hurricane relief in that bird, we've done everything.
We were in Malaysia and doing an exercise, and an LAV got stuck in the mud, and they used a 53 to pull it out, which is an LAV it's an up armored vehicle. I mean, it's a big ass 8-wheeled, armored vehicle. And I was like, they said at the time, they were like, we think this might be the heaviest thing that's ever been lifted.
Well, yeah, like don't quote me on the numbers because it's been a while, right? But so I think max gross weight was 73.5, 79 something with external load, and we could pick up 20,000 pounds pretty easy. I mean, you see pictures of routinely carrying LAVs, the 198 howitzers, which are super heavy. I mean, we were supposedly the most powerful aircraft in the free world. The only thing more powerful is that Mi-26 the Russians had.
Oh, really? Yeah, so I looked it up. A LAV is 12.8 tons. And it was stuck in the mud, so it's pulling more than that, and it pulled it out of the mud. That's pretty wild.
I mean, it's a great aircraft. I love flying it. I mean, it's just not my favorite, but I loved it.
That's the only one I've ever had an incident in where I thought we might crash. We were coming back from San Clemente Island, and we were over the water, and the hydraulics that helped us stabilize the controls went out, and the aircraft is just going back and forth and like doing that. So it's just a big wobble through the air.
There's 3 hydraulic systems though, so you got to back up. It's just that the pump fails
when we got on, they didn't give us the water wings or any of that. So if we would have gone into the water, we wouldn't have had, anything. And one of this is when I was with ANGLICO. One of the guys on the team was a 53 pilot who was on his ground tour. Right. And when we landed, man, he fucking chewed out that pilot, and I think he called not the division, the wing, and was like, this dude just flew, because we had just taken off of San Clemente Island. We're just over the water. Right. He's like, he could have turned around and went back, but he flew straight to Camp Pendleton with the aircraft just going all over the place. So, man, yeah, that's my experience in a 53.
That was actually my plan. I was going to, because by the time I got in Marine Corps, I knew the path. My plan was to do ANGLICO for my ground tour. That was like my big.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, well, you got to do a ground tour. I don't want to be a FAC. I'm going to see if I can get into ANGLICO. Because I wanted to be dual cool. You know what I mean? I wanted to have pilot's wings, the jump wings, and if I got a shot to go to the dive course too.
ANGLICO doesn't send anybody to dive. Well, you know what? I think at the time they might have been sending people to dive, actually.
Yeah. But I mean, because remember, it's dual cool.
Yeah.
The jump wing and the scuba wing. And then I was like, well, because I knew a couple of pilots who had all 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the pinnacle right there.
This was when was this again? When you were flying? This was in the early 80s, mid 80s?
Mid 80s, yeah. I flew 53s from 86 through 91.
I think there was a time when ANGLICO was sending some guys to dive school to support the recon guys. That was the only reason, was so that they could do that. But then at some point they got rid of it.
I even, as a Navy guy, I had a drug deal worked out with the SEALs, the Naval Special Warfare Unit, because we supported them a lot in the PI. They trained if they couldn't send a guy to Benning, right? They had like a mobile training team that would come out and get guys their 5 jumps so they could give them, because they were getting their tridents before their jump wings. Just sometimes things went out of sequence. And I worked out a drug deal. I was like, can I go through this course? And they're like, yeah, because we'd flown them around. I was like, can I go through this course? Because it was going to be like a 5-day gentleman's course. No screaming, yelling, just, hey, do this. You'll get your 4-day jumps, 1-night jump, and you'll get your naval parachuter swings, right? And you might know more about it than me, but it was some sort of mobile training team that went around.
Yeah, the Navy jump school is like 1 or 2 weeks long compared to the Army, which is like 6 or 8.
Right. So then my boss put the kibosh on it because he's like, if you break your leg, I can't use you, blah, 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 because I wanted those Navy jump wings really bad.
Yeah.
And I was like willing to do anything to get them, but it just never worked out.
People are all about the jump wings, man. People love it, especially once you get, you do all the jumps and you get the gold wings.
Yeah, that's what I wanted, man. I wanted those gold jump wings. It just never happened.
Yeah. A lot of the old ANGLICO guys are all about it because all the ANGLICOs were jump units and everybody went to jump school. But when somewhere between like the time you're talking about and the global war on terror, the active duty ANGLICOs were disbanded and only the reserve stayed. And when the global war on terror started, they brought back the ANGLICOs, the active ones, but they were like, hey, they don't need a jump mission. So the active ones didn't retain it, but the reserve ones do. So if you go to ANGLICO as a reservist, you will go to jump school. If you go to ANGLICO as an active duty guy, you may go to jump school if they worked a deal with someone else. Like half my team was jump qualified at first ANGLICO, but it wasn't a requirement. It wasn't on the TO or anything like that.
It always does that. Like I just read the Marine Corps got rid of their scout sniper platoons. I'm like, what kind of nonsense is that? Why would you get rid of a capability?
Yeah, that's super. That is very controversial right now, and it's not so So what it is they're not getting rid of scout snipers. But they are pulling them out of the infantry battalions, and they're only going to have battalion scouts, is what it sounds like. They're not going to be shooters. They're just going to be out there to like do scouting stuff. And it sounds like they're going to hold the snipers with Recon and MARSOC, with those 2 units. The schoolhouse has been with Recon for a little while, the Recon Sniper School. I mean, they have a page on Instagram. People can check that out. And I think I don't know. Some people are saying they should just move them up to the regiment. Some people, I'm not on board with it. I think we need to open up more slots if they need more shooters or if they need more people that are school trained, because it takes a little while for guys, and you can't water down the training to get more school trained snipers. Like it has to be the way it is.
After nearly 30 years in the military, have you heard the term "good idea fairy"?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, and it permeates, especially at the senior ranks. It's like let's come up with this idea. And I'm a big fan. Hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If the capability works, if it's a force multiplier, if it enhances the capability of that unit or that organization, why are you going to screw it up? You know what I mean? And it was also something for that young 03 to shoot for. You know what I mean? That Lance Corporal to go, you know what? I like this infantry shit. I'm always guys like, I'm not a door kicker. I never was going to be a door kicker. I didn't like being out in the field. I remember, getting put out in the snow at night, 2 a.m, freezing, watching the helo go away. And I was like, that guy's going to be in the club drinking a beer. I'm out here for the next week, and
what am I doing?
So, but, for that young infantry guy, that Lance Corporal, he's like, he sees that, he goes, that's cool. I think I may want to do that, and then he goes, hey, goes to the gunny. What do I do to be a scout sniper? And then he goes, you got to do A, B, C, D, right? Maybe now he's got a goal to shoot for. And it's just good capability, but, I'm not the commandant.
I'd like to.
You never ask me my opinion.
I'd like to hear like a detailed reasoning why they're doing it, but it's going to be, for me, it's like, how are you going to justify this when your shift is to battling on these islands off Japan or wherever, battling China and all these Pacific islands where literally a sniper, that's like his, one of the best places you could put a guy,
I mean, read about the Japanese were very effective, and they had the Marines and Army scared on a lot of these islands because those guys would be sitting in trees for days waiting to shoot people.
And I'm sure you probably know as well as I do, once you're out of the military, you're only getting about 80% of the information that's actually happening. So people get all outraged about stuff because they don't want to wait for the full picture to kind of develop. But again, I'm open to hearing why. You know what I'm saying? I'm open to hearing what's the reasoning? Like, what do we, obviously they're not going to explain it to me. Who am I? They don't give a fuck. But there's a lot of pushback all across social media, all across, like, everything I've seen is just not good about, people are pretty pissed about it.
It's usually about money. I mean, I try to stay a little connected to my former community in the Air Force, which is, kind of getting kicked in the jimmy by Big Blue right now. You know what I mean? And most of it's about money.
I've heard that I've heard some people say that snipers didn't do a very good job of selling themselves in the infantry battalions, and this is kind of the result of their kind of narrow focus. And I don't know if that's true. I've seen multiple people comment that on both Reddit, both on Instagram, when this has come up in different topics on Twitter. Guys saying that this is dumb. Why would the Marine Corps ever do this? And then other people going, hey, this is kind of the sniper community's fault for not showing off their full skill set.
Yeah.
They want to go out and shoot guns all day, which is cool, but you got to show how well rounded you are, as an asset. So
I can't, again, it's not my area of expertise. I can't speak on it. I'm not certainly in the loop in any way, shape, or form on that. I'm like you. I read it. I have an initial gut reaction that seems like a capability you wouldn't want to get rid of, but you're 100% right. There's probably some other sides to it that I don't know about, but I just, I think just there's an overall sort of general not like, for lack of a better term, people just don't like snipers. They think it's kind of a dirty, shitty, kind of maybe backhanded way to kill people, which is silly because the whole point of war. Problem is people that gets into rationalizing war a little more, but I don't know. Like I said, I mean, we could probably spend a whole podcast going over things the military as a whole is doing that I think dilute and water down our ability to prosecute the mission, which is all I care about.
I think snipers are under the same kind of pressure that people in any specialized community or specialized job set, like in ANGLICO or special operations units, where if you're under the control of a commander that doesn't know really what your full capabilities are, they don't understand what you do, then they're not going to utilize you in the way that they should be. And so it's kind of on you to be that advocate for yourself and your guys and be like, hey, here's our capabilities. You have to sit in on the meetings and hear them go, hey, we have this problem that we need to take care of. How do we take care of it? And you come in and go, hey, me and my guys can go right here and take care of it this way, or be an asset, So again, I don't know. I'm interested in hearing more about it. It's very huge pushback from the veteran community, which people can say whatever. There are a bunch of old vets that aren't in the military anymore, but dude, there's millions of guys that have been serving and have 20 years of experience in the global war on terror, and I think their opinion should, count for something. You know what I'm saying? And I know every war is different and stuff like that, but again, it's going to be difficult for someone to explain to me why an infantry battalion shouldn't have snipers on hand ready to work on these remote islands. You know what I'm saying? I just don't.
An overwatch. I mean, you want your snipers in a position where they can overwatch the maneuver elements, so they can, they've got the ability to see out a little ahead of those maneuver elements, give them information. There's intelligence gathering associated with it. There's overwatch. I mean, like I said, I only know the basics and I can explain that. You know what I mean? So the guys who are really expert in it probably spend, again, a whole podcast telling you why you need snipers involved in maneuver warfare. But
let's talk about what was the planning like for Anaconda? you know, when you got the word like, hey, we're going to be doing this mission, like what was, you guys are the first, you know, one of the first responses to 9/11. One, as a New Yorker, I'm sure that was probably amazing to hear that, or to be a part of that. Two, can you kind of give us like a detailed, you know, kind of background on that? It's a historic event, you know.
Kind of interesting you say that, because we were not in the planning for Anaconda, right? Anaconda was a conventional op with some special operations support. And when we got to Afghanistan, no one knew who the fuck we were. Like, we went to Pakistan, and then we moved in. Like, when I got to Kandahar, they're like, they know you're coming. I got there with the advanced team, right? And they're like, yeah, they know you're coming. We get there, and the 101st Airborne's there. The Marines had just turned it over to the 101st Airborne and the Canadians. And they're literally like, who the fuck are you guys? We're like, we're Air Force Rescue. Like, we got Medevac. We don't need you guys. And, you know, and I won't belabor the point, but then the rest of the time was spent saying, hey, we were told you guys will give us a little, you know, BOS, base operating support, so we could set up our operations. We did set them up. Then we're hearing about this Operation Anaconda, right? Mainly through special operations contacts that we have, because so many of our guys come from the special operations community, either the PJs or some of the, my boss had been a pilot in a special operations squadron. So we're hearing from these guys about this operation, and we're like, well, we want to get in on it. They're like, no, we got it all set and blah, blah, blah. And the thing kicked off. We had no part in it. We were just sitting alert for the fighters flying in and bombers flying in and out of Afghanistan. That was still our job, right? Then things go to shit pretty quickly, right? And then they're like, oh, wait, you guys have these helicopters. Can you guys go up here and stand by at this FARP up here? And then we go up to the FARP, and we're sitting there, and then I experienced an earthquake there, and we were up at the FARP. Then they start using us. The 10th Mountain's really heavily engaged, and there's a couple of times where the Medevac guys couldn't get in there. This isn't a slam on them. This is just they couldn't get in there. There was a lot of shooting. Even the Apaches were all. I mean, the Marines had to send aircraft from the MEU off the coast of Pakistan, or because the Apaches had got shot up so bad those first couple of days that the Marines had to send like 6 Cobras, 2 53s up to Bagram, because I was there when they got there, right? Mm-hmm. Because the Apaches had got shot up so bad and there wasn't enough gunship support, right? So it's really not going well those first couple of days, right? And then we get up there, and the night before my mission, a 2-ship from our unit had went out, pulled some 10th Mountain guys out in a pretty big firefight and got wounded out. Matter of fact, the funny story, we laughed, one of the PJs who'd been a Army Special Forces guy before coming over to the Air Force, he doesn't want to get back in the aircraft, right? Because he's like, this platoon commander's fucked up. Let me stay here and take over this platoon and get this fight going. Because I guess the lieutenant was basically catatonic, like just not, you know, and his NCOs are running the show, and our guy's like, no, I can stay. And my buddy Ed, who's flying a lead aircraft, he goes, get the fuck back in the aircraft. Like,
I'm going to stay and take over this platoon. All right, go ahead, man.
So they get back the next night. And I remember my buddy just brushing his teeth after telling me about this big mission with all the shooting and shit, right? And I remember going, man, I hope if I get shot at like that, I can brush my teeth like it was no big deal. You know what I mean? And then the very next night, we get called up to FARP Texaco. There was this FARP. And you know, what they were trying to do in Anaconda was get the enemy in a spot, cut off their avenue of escape, which they relied on indigenous forces to be the blocking force, which was not a great idea, in my opinion. There was no artillery, right? And every place they inserted American troops was in the low ground, right? So, and the enemy knew we were coming, and they had known for a couple of weeks, that this was being planned. So it just, it turned kind of shitty fairly quickly. And don't take my word for it. You can read the histories of it. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. That's pretty much how it went down. The enemy knew we were coming. They had the high ground. They had all the advantageous tactical positions. And, they started kind of handing our ass to us a little bit. Right. And so we're up there that next day and we're waiting, sitting on alert. And we're actually spinning up, getting ready to go back to Kandahar, which is about an hour and a half, 40-minute flight back. And they're like, hey, we have these wounded guys trapped at this LZ. No one's been able to get them out. Will you guys give it a shot? So I'm co-pilot, the flight lead. And he goes, yeah, we'll give it a shot. Let us shut down and brief it up, right? So he gets the details. I'll never forget this. He calls us in, a little school circle as, 12 of us. And he's like, all right, if we go do this, there's a really good chance we're getting fucked up. Does anybody have a problem with that? And I remember I'm standing in the back and I'm going, I kind of have a problem with that,
Yeah.
but I don't, but I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
And my friend, Bob Roberts, who's a PJ, Scarecrow, we called him because he was so skinny. He's like, fuck no, let's go. So now I'm like, shit, I can't say anything now. Right. So we go out on this mission.
That's the ultimate peer pressure.
Yeah. Well, that's what is, people have asked, like, why do you go? What keeps you from going? I said, because it's really peer pressure. Like, you don't want to look like, I'm like, one, you don't want to look like a pussy to your coworkers or your friends. But I said, you also start thinking about how am I going to look at my kids or my wife or anybody I know if I don't go? You know what I mean? Because you could, as an aviator, go, I'm not going. They're not going to force you to fly. It's not like in a rifle platoon where the gunny's going to punch you in the face, grab you by, your deuce gear and send you down the road. They're not going to make you go if you're an air crew guy. But it is peer pressure. It is nothing else. You're just like, because you are scared. So we go out and this mission just turns to shit from the minute we roll out, right? We're actually talking to the CAOC, the Combined Air Operations Center, which at the time is in Saudi Arabia before it moved to Al Udeid. They're passing us information that we just passed to them. We finally talked to a JTAC who we think is co-located with the wounded guys. And he's telling us where we need to go and giving us grid coordinates and everything. Turns out he ended up being in a TOC somewhere, right? But we don't know this. So we end up landing in the wrong LZ. We get mortared and shot at in the LZ. We're like, obviously this ain't the right place. We got to go. Then we landed this is where it gets kind of funny. We landed in a second LZ that they gave us grid coordinates for. And all of a sudden, 3 snuffies from the 10th Mountain Division jump on the aircraft. Well, I think these are the wounded guys, right? Then about 30 seconds later, the PJs go, hey, sir, nobody's wounded. These guys ain't wounded. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, these guys just think we're exfilling them. I'm like, well, they got to go.
Back into the fight, boys.
Right. So now he's manhandling the guy. Like, remember in Apocalypse Now when that guy's like, I'm not going? When the Hueys land, it was like that. The PJs had to manhandle these poor guys off the aircraft and send them back to the fight, right? And I feel bad about it, but it was like high altitude, 9,000 feet. We were real power limited. But, and everybody's got buzz saws. Everybody's got remember those little
IR flashers,
diamond shaped lights that everybody had back in the early part. And there's a fight going on, right? We finally get the LZ that the actual wounded guys are. Now it's like at 9,800 feet. So now we got to dump gas, right? But we can't go high to dump gas because we don't want to get shot down. We think there's a missile threat, right? So now we're dumping gas. We think we dumped gas on our own troops. Hopefully it dissipated before it got on any of them. We got to dump gas so we can get in the LZ. And then we finally get into the right LZ. We get the guys out, fairly uneventful, small arms here or there. The big one when we landed in the wrong, there was some RPGs. And again, it's 20 years now. It was actually 21 years to the day the other day. So my memory, might be a little, off, but, there was some shooting and it was pretty intense, but we get the guys out of there and we finally landed at the FARP with 8 minutes of gas because we stayed past bingo because we hadn't found the guy yet. And there was a point where we're like, we're going to stay till we find these guys. Weren't going to leave it because we were the last hope for these guys.
Yeah,
they've been trying to get them out all day. So, and it was, there was definitely a minute there where I'm like, I'm definitely going to be on TV getting beheaded tomorrow. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, and the joke for me, every deployment, that one and everyone was, everyone's like, we get captured. I'm just telling them you're Jewish, and, or, guys would be like, hey, maybe the Taliban will have a kosher meal for you, even though I don't keep kosher, but just, that was the fun joke among the guys. So I was like, there was one point where we started running out of power. The low rotor horn came on and we had to kind of slide down the mountain. It looked like we might crash for a second. Luckily, the guy was flying with Tom Cahill, who got the Silver Star that night. Really good pilot. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He got us out of that. We were able to stay flying. But, it was a couple of times where I was like, you know what? Things aren't looking good for Mrs. Dorelis' little boy. But, we managed to get it done. And my favorite part of the story is we calculated it. We literally had 8 minutes of gas left when we landed. And the best part is we were all due for check rides the next week. And they were actually going to give us check rides. We had went up to K2 in Uzbekistan. And they were actually going to make us take check rides. And
you want to explain what that is for people that don't know?
A check ride is your annual proficiency flight where you go out with an instructor. They have you do a series of tasks and a mission, throw all kinds of problems in it, right? To make it as difficult as possible. You solve those problems and, without screwing it up completely, you pass your check ride. You're good for another year, right? So I went to the boss, me and Tom, and we go, hey, sir, isn't a check ride to see if we can conduct a 2-ship night rescue in combat, under combat conditions with a 2-ship formation? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, didn't we just do that? Can't that count as a check ride? And he was like, you know what? That's a good idea. Get me a Form 8, which is the Air Force form for check rides. He goes, and I'll sign it. And we did. So
it's hilarious. That's how into the certifications and qualifications at the air side of the military is. Like, it's very, like, you have to check all these boxes and get these qualifications or you're not flying,
So well into the war, right? Well into the mid-2000s, right? They're still doing operational readiness inspections where they come in and go, we have to see your mobility line, which is, when guys, all the shit you do to deploy, your wheels, your this, all that, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, why not observe our real mobility line since we're constantly deploying? Like in Air Force Rescue, we were basically on a 1-to-1 dwell. That's why we did shorter deployments, 90 days, 120 days, because you were either deployed, coming home from a deployment, or getting ready to deploy, because we didn't have a lot of assets. So there wasn't like any lulls, right? So we had people deploying constantly in our wing, right? Mm-hmm. So on any given day, they could come and actually observe the actual application of those items they're inspecting, right? But instead, they come and make you do the notional shit. And you're just, if I had hair, I'd have been ripping it out. We'd be like, this is absolutely absurd. But that's the things I don't miss about the military.
Yeah, for
sure. That kind of stuff.
Same thing in the Marine Corps. They do
it's across the board.
They do the CGRI, the Commanding General's Readiness Inspection.
Right. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing as an ORI. It's the beast of the same name. Yeah. But if those things should have been completely suspended during the war because everybody's doing it for real, right? And except for a few cats and dogs, nobody's deploying unqualified on their weapon. Nobody's deploying without their mop gear. When, as crazy as it sounds, war is the best thing that happens to the military because the machine runs the problems get ironed out, and they get ironed out in a very quick amount of time. And, everything is geared towards accomplishing the mission and creating those efficiencies that'll allow you to do that. Right. So, when these big organizations continue to do this bureaucratic nonsense, it actually hurts. But I mean, it's a story to laugh about now, but at the time it used to really drive me nuts, man.
So those of us that deployed to Afghanistan and stuff, we know the difference, or we know medevac wise, you basically have dust off, Pedro, and Tricky. Dust off is the Army medevac helicopter. Pedro is the Air Force medevac, right. You guys. And then Tricky was the British Chinook that went out for mass CASs and stuff like that. Can you kind of explain the difference, because mainly between you guys and dust off, because both of you guys fly 60s, different models, mind you, and can you explain the difference between a dust off flight and a Pedro flight?
Well, so again, and I got to go back. The main mission of Pedro or Jolly, which is the call sign we had in Iraq, right, which goes back to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Our main mission is combat search and rescue, right? So our whole raison d'etre, our reason for being is, okay, Joe fighter pilot comes off the target, Sam strike, boom, he punches out, we go get him before he gets captured or killed. That's the job, right? Well, thankfully, that wasn't happening in either Iraq or Afghanistan. And some of our leadership just wanted us to do that only, right? But special operations guys, especially, like, hey, you have all these underutilized helicopters here. We can use them. So we ended up initially supporting the 160th, and we followed them around. And in case something bad happened on a lot of those hits with those guys, we would go and respond, even though they self-SAR'd a lot of times before we ever got there. Then if an aircraft went down, Marine, Army, whatever, we respond to that, right? Then the dust-off guys were getting tapped out. Like they're spread too thin. So they said, hey, will you guys help? So now we're doing normal 9-line medevacs, but the main difference between us and dust-off, and again, I want to be very clear here, this is not a pejorative in any way, shape, or form about the crews, about their capabilities or whatever. This is just simply a fact. They have a Red Cross. They're unarmed, right? And so the threat to them is significantly higher when they're dealing with people who aren't going to honor that Red Cross, right? So there were times where their leadership would consider something a little too risky, right? We, on the other hand, didn't have a Red Cross. We have 50s and miniguns on the aircraft. So essentially, we could fight our way into the LZ and fight our way out, right? Now, whether a Pedro came, a dust-off, or a Tricky came, that was really the luck of the draw that day. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, you're better suited for this mission. It was just, if, sometimes the Mert guys, those are the Brits, Tricky would get called because they were up first or they were around, and the Pedros and the dust-offs were out. So it wasn't like one pick over the other. We were doing straight medevac. So we were assigned to support, the guys out in the green zone, out of Bastion or Leatherneck, and we were just normal 9 lines. And the only thing that differentiated us is if you shot at us, we could shoot back. And generally become a victim of your own success. A lot of the Marines, we would come no matter what, much to our own detriment, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think we ever said we're not coming or we're not coming in. So, the guys tend to think you're some sort of super aircraft that just can fuck everything up and is impervious to, ground fire and all that. It's not true. It's just, I remember one Marine telling me, I was at Bethesda because we had an aircraft shot down, and I was with the family of the pilot supporting them, and I had a Marine tell me, yeah, you guys come in and do all these crazy maneuvers to get in the LZ. And I'm like, listen, man, that's us trying not to run into each other. It's not like we're the Thunderbirds.
Oh, there went my stuff. My apologies for those watching and listening. My dog Taser just pulled my camera and light down. So, my apologies for interrupting there. Go ahead.
No sweat.
So,
yeah. Anyway, like I was saying, make a long story short, there's differences in the capabilities, but we were all there available as a medevac platform for the guys fighting in whatever the, designated geographic area was. But I mean, yeah, like the only difference between us and Dust Off is we were armed, and, but beyond that, the capabilities in that scenario are roughly the same. And the same with the MERT. The MERT was just, they had a bigger aircraft so they could take more guys, and they also had a doctor with them. They brought some pretty interesting capabilities to the fight. But I mean,
yeah, they could prep their guys like pre-surgery on the flight in the Chinooks, right? And for tricky.
Yeah, the PJs could do a lot of stuff too, but they don't have a lot of room to work in the back there. Our if you look at us compared to a Dust Off, because of the extra fuel tanks, our cabin space is a little smaller and stuff. But yeah, I mean, the reality is if you get hit, whether it's a Dust Off, a Pedro, or a Tricky, you're just going to have some amazing medics. I mean, the survival rate, if I'm not mistaken, was way into the high 90s, almost with like ridiculous injuries that no one ever would have survived previously. You know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure.
And that's good or bad depending on your opinion. But I mean, the Cape, I've seen some amazing stuff. I mean, the way I look at my career is I was happy to be in the same room with some of these guys. Like I said, I mean, I listen to your podcast, others. New York guys have done amazing stuff. I've been on a couple of good missions. I can tell you, I know I'm not a coward, and I know I'll go do the job if you ask me to do it. But, I work with some ridiculous pipe hitters, and I was just happy to be in the same room with a lot of those guys, and the same goes for the people we supported. I mean, watching, I've been in LZs watching Army or Marine infantry guys, they're inside the rotor disc, in a gunfight, making sure they're going to get their wounded out, just amazing stuff. That's just, it's all, Jerry Bruckheimer movie stuff, and so I was just happy to be there with those guys. Like
in a moment like that, when you're coming in on a hot LZ, what's going through your mind? Because obviously it's extremely dangerous for you guys because there's no armor.
Honestly, the number one thing you're worried about is not fucking it up. Don't crash the airplane. Don't get the crew hurt. That's much more than fearing for your own safety, is the fear that you'll fuck something up. And get somebody hurt, get yourself hurt, fail the guys you're going to work with, and help. That, I can only speak for me. I'm not telling you I wasn't scared or fearful. That's absolutely not true. But the biggest thing I feared was fucking up and being a limfac and getting somebody hurt, or not being able to accomplish the mission, whatever it was. Get the wounded out, get the pilot out that we're going to get, get the heroes home that we were going to recover. That was always, getting my crew hurt, getting anyone on my crew hurt. That was always the biggest fear for me.
Does that become mentally challenging to you're seeing the worst part of the war every day, right? When you're running medevacs, you're seeing anywhere from sprained ankles to amputees.
That's an interesting question and I still fly EMS helicopters. So I've been flying them since I retired, right? So it's a question for a medical profession. I mean, I'm very desensitized to that. You have to be. You have to be able to go out and do the mission. You have to be able to go out and fulfill that. So you shove all those things into what I call the hollow leg, and then we're getting into all the other issues post-military that people go through. And I went through them as well. You know what I mean? So it becomes a problem. It became a problem after I retired. It wasn't a problem for me then, as far as doing the job goes. It was a problem for me as being a husband and father was, right? And it was a problem in other areas. it wasn't a problem then for me going out and doing the job. And a matter of fact, it's only in recent years that I don't miss the job more than anything in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But you know, you gotta, I mean, unfortunately, my interaction with mental health professionals has been minimal, purposefully, you know. But you know, what little I've gleaned is, yeah, it's a problem. You know, it eats away at you. You know, and I didn't. You know, I was driving the bus. You know, the medics, the PJs, the stuff they saw is much worse. But you know,
sure.
you have to mentally sort of come to terms with the fact that you're, you know. And I used to struggle with this. Like, I was pretty good at war. War's man's worst endeavor. So I used to struggle with the fact that I sort of liked and was good at war, right? And I don't think I'm unique in that. I bet most of the people you've had on, some of the, you know, will tell you the same thing. But so you sort of have to come to grips with that, you know. But and you know, especially on a show like yours where you have so many of these amazing people on, you know, I hesitate, but you know, I chose the warrior profession, right? Mm-hmm. I chose the profession of arms. Well, you're going to be asked to do warrior shit, right? So are you going to be good at doing warrior shit? Do you want to be, or do you want to be someone who's like, oh, this is bad. This is man's worst endeavor. And I'm, you know, I don't want to be involved in it or whatever. That's not the case. You know, we all chose this. And whether the reality meets expectations or not, at some point you're asked to do warrior shit, whatever your job is, right? And then you got to be good at it, or you're failing the people around you. You know, again, it's very cliche. The military, all the war, it's very cliche. And I'm not minimizing, but I'm saying, like, you don't want to fail the people around you. You do everything you can to not fail those around you, to not be a limfac, to not be the guy that's the guy the other people have to worry about. If you have people that you're responsible for in your crew, you want to do everything you can to make sure they get home to their families, and that you do everything in your power to make that happen. You know, I came to grips with the fact there's a lot of things in war I couldn't control, so I tried not to worry about those. Mm-hmm. Tried to worry about the things I could have an effect on. And yeah, it does. I mean, even now, you know, after 10 years of flying around people on their worst day, it takes a toll on you. And like I said earlier, you know, unfortunately, I'm a little desensitized to human suffering. Unless it involves kids, I wish it bothered me more, but it doesn't. You know what I mean? And the only things I can get emotional about, usually, like we talked about, involve my pets. You know, my mom and I were very close. I mentioned that to you earlier. You know, she raised me. She worked 2 jobs, 7 days a week. You know, she and I were very, very tight. And when she died, I had already been through a couple of deployments, and I never cried once. And I feel horrible about that. But I mean, it just, I remember I had to go ID her body and do all this because she died. You know, I was PCSing and unfortunately had a heart attack at home. She had a home health care person who found her. But I mean, I wish I wasn't. It's a byproduct of this profession sometimes, just like, you know, first responders who I work with all the time, cops and firemen. I have a childhood friend who was a fireman for 30 years. You know, he tells me stories and we talk, and he goes, you know, other than other firemen, you're the only guy out of all of our friends that I can have a discussion with because you kind of get it, you know, and you know, that disconnect with civilians I get because people ask questions, but when you give them the answers, their eyes glaze over. They don't want to hear it because they can't wrap their heads around the reality of, you know, war's like an alternate universe, man. It really is.
Yeah, it really is.
It's like being in like this alternate universe. And the craziness of it is so many of us kind of like it. That what I liked about it was that everything was important, and people were willing to risk everything for each other. You know, you'd risk your life for a guy you don't even like. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the truth. Like, people don't do that, but you know, despite the movies, not everybody gets along in a unit, right? And not everybody's best buds, right? But it doesn't matter. That guy's in your unit. You're not gonna be like, I hate that guy, fuck him. You're gonna be like, oh shit, so and so. All right, we got to go get him. Or one of the things that struck me was very minor we were supporting some tier 1 guys, and when a bearded, tatted guy looks you in the face and goes, "Hey, sir, if shit goes south, you'll be there, right?" And you shake his hand and go, "Yeah, we'll be there." There's not a lot of wiggle room there, man.
Yeah.
It's not. You know what I mean? Or there's not a lot of wiggle room when you get a 9 line and I'm on the horn or a JTAC like yourself, and you're getting me into the LZ. There's just not a lot of wiggle room. There is a point where you're like, yeah, this is fucking dangerous, and I may get shot in the face, but I have to go. And that's just the name of the game.
This whole thing works only because everybody does their part.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm a hero. I'll never call myself a hero, though. I will say I'm not a coward, right? But the cliche from Band of Brothers, man, out till the day I die, I was in the company of heroes every fucking day. Every day.
Yeah,
every day.
I did something similar when I got to Afghanistan on my second deployment. I was going in as an Afghan Army advisor, as the JTAC, the team JTAC for the advisor team into Sangin. And me and my corpsman, I was like, "Hey man," I was like, "Let's go down to we were at Leatherneck, for a couple days doing our in briefs and stuff." I was like, "Let's go down to the flight line and get some updated imagery for our maps and introduce ourselves to the crews." And that was like one of those, like, we went by Pedro's ready room. We're like, "Hey, what's up? This is, I'm Siege 2-2. So if you hear me on the radio, if you hear, that's me, I'm expecting you to come, bro, kind of deal." And it was a joking, but like half joking, like, haha, but seriously, yeah, I'm going to need you.
Yeah. I mean, I've had it happen in the other way. We were sneaking our enlisted guys into the club in Turkey. Right? Because there were still old clubs back then.
Yeah.
We're sneaking our crew in and we got caught. And this captain was like throwing them out and shit. And he was a fighter pilot. We're like, "Dude, you just made the no pickup list." Right? And dude, that was a big deal. Like, we got a phone call about that. Like, he thought we were serious.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, this was during like Operation Northern Watch and stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, we got a phone call." Like, no, of course, we're not going to pick him up, but he was being a dick.
We're going to give you shit about it when we do, though.
Yeah, I mean, we actually got a phone call about that, because we're like, "All right, dude, you made that." Yeah. We looked at his name tag. I was like, "Write that name down." No pickup list for you. You know what I mean? But I mean, that's yeah, right.
It's serious business, man. What you were saying real quick before you were like, everything is serious. Everything kind of matters. And that's 100% true. And I think that's why a lot of guys get out of the military and have issues, because they look around and they're like, none of this fucking matters. It's a rat race to nothing. Whereas when I was in the military, I had a mission. I had people that were depending on me. I had a job that was literally life and death. You're a pilot. I was a JTAC. It's like, if I fuck this up, bad things could happen. So like, everything was serious, and it was serious for a reason. And we saw those examples of why it was serious through accidents in training, people getting injured, people getting killed in country and stuff like that. And it was just constantly reinforced. I was telling my neighbor when I got out of the military, I was like, "Yeah, man, I was a JTAC, and we had this thing called a JFO. It's a Joint Fires Observer. And you train him to kind of be your eyes and ears so that you can spread out the capability. And if I get shot in the face, then he can take over and kind of save the day." And he's like, "If you get shot in the face, like, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "Dude, the reality is you got to plan for that." I know it sounds fucked up, but like, what happens if I get shot? Are my guys trained up to do a medevac? Can they do a emergency medevac if needed?
When you're going into the LZ, even if you're not flying, right? Let's say you're a co-pilot, or just even the other guy's just flying. You're on the controls in case he gets shot. You're right there in case something bad happens. And you're right. It's the reality of it. Like, you have discussions with family about things that you'd never have normally. I mean, I remember telling my wife, "Listen, if I'm fucked up to the point where I can't wipe my own ass, that's it. That's it. I'm done. I don't want, it's as real as life is ever going to get."
I mean, you got 18-year-olds filling out their wills for real, because it's a real thing.
It's as real as it's ever going to get. And, when I go in these things, I don't want to say it's emotional, but it just brings up these things that I don't think about that much anymore is just like, it was just, it meant something that just nothing else is ever going to mean anything. You know,
I wouldn't, I hate for you to put it that way or look at it in that kind of light. And I know what you're saying, and I try to dissuade guys from kind of getting that mentality, because there is more out there. There is way cooler. There is super cool stuff to do and see. And
I found my post-military love affair, and I mean, I still fly, which I'm blessed to do. I'm an actor now. You know what I mean?
Nice.
And I've been doing that for about 5-6 years since I retired. And it's odd, but playing pretend is the only thing that's given me as much jazz and as excitement as being a combat pilot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I miss the most is the people and the camaraderie and the joking. Like, I miss the innocuous stuff. Like, I had lunch with a friend of mine, and we were just talking about funny shit. You know what I mean? Just the funny shit that we just laughed our ass off about. And when you tell somebody who wasn't there, they look at you like, it's not even really interesting or funny, but it's something that you share with somebody else that just, the hysteria, and everybody has those stories. You know what I mean? And that's what you miss, the sitting around. I tell people, like, war is an absurdity, right? And then you have people who make it more absurd with rules and things that, so all you do is laugh, you know, it's just this absurd, it's this absurd comedy show. Yeah, it's serious business, but all you do is laugh. I don't care what unit you're in. I don't care if you're an O or an E. Generally, any part of your day, given, you know, your given day while you're deployed, is standing around laughing at shit because it's so crazy.
There is a lot of craziness, and there is a lot of laughing.
And, you know,
there's a lot of laughing after the fact at things that were miserable in the moment.
Oh yeah.
You know, that shared misery.
You just have to laugh because it's so stupid and miserable.
Yeah.
All you can do is laugh, or you're gonna sit there and focus on how much it sucks.
Yeah. The green weenie.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the things. I've lost a lot of friends to, you know, and I've tried to be in the suicide prevention space, you know, since I've retired. You know, I'm part of MVP, this organization. I don't know if you heard of them or not, but it's an amazing organization. So it's a group. It was founded by Nate Boyer, who was a Green Beret, but he also played for the Seahawks, and Jay Glazer from the NFL on Fox. And it's about 8 chapters in the country. We meet on Fridays. We have a workout, and then we sit around and talk for an hour after that. But it's pro athletes and veterans, because they found when a lot of pro athletes leave their respective sports, they go through the same things as veterans go through. Like, the NFL has a huge suicide rate. In Vegas, where I am, it's very fighter heavy, right? And when a lot of these guys can't fight anymore, man, they spiral. We just lost a friend of mine, you know, who was a world champion kickboxer, who took his own life. Tim Lane, an amazing dude. You know, just, you know, the post-fight stuff was just, it was, you know, we had some demons, like a lot of, you know, so they found that getting us together with each other is really helpful. And it's just, you know, and you're around your tribe, sort of, you know what I mean? And then I coordinated the first Silkies hike in Vegas, you know, the Irreverent Warrior Silkies hike. Yeah. I coordinated that. So I've tried to be in it, because I've lost, like my buddy Tom, who got the Silver Star, you know, we lost him to his demons, you know, and I've had a couple other friends. And what I find interesting is all the guys I lost were guys I looked up to and thought were tougher than me, braver than me, better pilots than me, you know, and I would be like, man, how am I going to survive if they're having problems? You know what I mean? And, you know, by the grace of God, I did. You know, I got a great family. I had an ex-wife who stayed with me a lot longer than she should have. And you know, I'll always be grateful for it. But I mean, it was tough. It took me a decade to really be good with being retired and not being in the fight anymore. And even like the evacuation of Afghanistan, I was shocked at the, I don't want to say it sent me into a spiral, but it just got me pissed. And I saw HH-60s Pavehawks there, right? So now I'm like, fuck, I should be there. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm retired a decade already. And my first thought is, oh shit, I should be there. And
Yeah.
then just the whole fiasco of it, I thought I was over it. I was really shocked at the amount of anger and emotion that kind of brought back in me, you know. So it just takes a while, man, because those experiences are so intense. But I wouldn't trade them for the world. And you know, the one thing, if anyone gets out of this interview with me, and I say it on every interview I've done, is, man, I consider my military service a gift, like a literal gift from God.
For sure.
It was everything I wanted it to be. It was, I wouldn't trade not 1 second. Yeah, I wish my plan would have went according to plan and I could have been a Marine aviator and this, that, and the other. But on the other hand, I had so many great experiences happen after that in the other branches of the military that I can't really say that, but but overall, as crazy, as undistinguished and as crazy as my career was, man, it was a gift. I just worked with the greatest people, got to do the coolest things. And I mean, it makes you love this country, not because of any flag waving, but I'm just a regular guy, grew up with a single mom, the most unofficer-like, most unmilitary. I hated people telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up achieving my dreams because of the U.S. military, literally. And it's a gift, man.
Yeah, I think it's an option that a lot of people don't realize is there, or it's a good option that most people misunderstand. You know, and part of that is because we don't have this military. There's just not, because there's no draft or anything. There's no buy-in, so a lot of families don't have any kind of, their closest relationship with the military might be like a distant cousin or something that joined the army. But people don't understand that if you are you're immediately lifted into the middle class. So if you're if you've lived in the lower class, food stamps and stuff like that, you're going to be immediately lifted into an opportunity to get maybe any debt you have out under control, get some kind of structure in your life that helps you kind of set and accomplish different goals and stuff like that. And it gives you these benefits to go to college. Like if you've never been to college, your family couldn't afford it. Now you can go to school. And if you just do 4 years, you get the same school benefits if you do 4 years, or if you do 20 years, if you do 30 years, you get the same school benefits. But if you do just 4 years or whatever, and you get out and go to school, now you're much more mature than you were when you were 18. Imagine if you would have went to Embry-Riddle and you were 22, 23, how much different that experience probably would have been.
I got a master's through the military and graduated magna cum laude with a 3.9 GPA.
It's such a good opportunity. You get to do stuff like you're talking about. You flew in these different, imagine if you were like just a regular guy and you're like, I want to become a pilot. Well, okay, go be a pilot, go become a commercial airline pilot or whatever. That's cool. But you were like, I want to be a pilot, and you end up in a 60 flying around doing stuff that no civilian pilot's ever going to get to do, just because of the nature of the beast. And that's kind of what it is for a lot of jobs. You get to see these crazy things. You get to do these crazy things that you'll never get the opportunity to do that again anywhere else, unless you're like a billionaire and you can set up your own range.
No, I mean,
I loved it.
It was great. It's these amazing people that this amazing collection of people. And I love is the stereotype that the people going to military are people who don't have a lot of options, who aren't very smart, I love that, because I'm like, keep thinking that. I have met the most intelligent, well-read, smartest people. And I'm not talking about on the officer side either. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about E1s, E2s that are day trading and making dough, or just well-read, smart, good, just people like guys from super rich families who are like a PFC because they just want to test themselves and want to see if they can do this. And just because they've read, or guys who are reading like samurai books, from the time, and they just want to be a modern day samurai or the equivalent. But just guys who are well read, smart, can think on their feet, solve. I can't tell you how many times overseas we'd be mulling a problem, and here comes Sergeant so and so. Hey, sir, I think we can do this, that, and the other. That sounds like a good idea, and boom, problem solved. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You got a bunch of college graduates standing around scratching their heads. Well, how do we do that? How do we do that? Here comes Sergeant. Hey, sir, we can do this, this, and that. Okay. You know what I mean? So it's just these amazing people that I was so privileged to know and work with, and friendships that I'll have for the rest of my life. Like, here I am. I'm your pretty typical, I'm middle of the road, but maybe pretty liberal Jewish guy from New York, right? I'm friends with some tobacco chewing redneck motherfuckers that'll be friends of mine for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just guys I never would have met or been around had I not left to go on this grand adventure, and
that's definitely the best part of the military is the exposure to different ideas, different people from different cultures, from different areas, diversity of thought, and what you're saying is completely true. I hate the stereotype that Marines are morons or whatever. I don't know when this crayon eater thing became like a thing, but I'm like, that's dumb, but whatever, I'm not going to bitch about it because it doesn't do anything.
Guys revel in it, which is cool, but it doesn't matter because when you're in the Marine Corps, and this goes really for every branch, it's just you meet these people that just go from one extreme to the other in terms of, you get guys who fit that stereotype, you get some knuckleheads, you get this, but you got guys who are just so smart, so well-rounded, so, they have the ability to think on their feet and solve problems. And it's just an amazing organization, and I mean, I think the DOD is probably this nation's greatest asset. People look at me like, oh, whatever, but I do because of that. And look at the good we do. Look, there's humanitarian things where it gets so big that the only people who can do it are the military, and the military's main job is to blow out shit up and break shit. But there are times when it's like, well, who else can roll up with a hospital ship or, LPH now with, 30 helicopters and 1,200 Marines and sailors who can now set up tents and medical facilities and do this and make fresh water and just do all this shit and save thousands of fucking lives in a place where those people would be fucked if it wasn't, for the fact that, so it's been an amazing adventure. I've had some, great times. Like I said, especially compared to some of the pipe hitters you have on the show, I'm no door kicking, shoot bad guys in the face type of dude. I'm your typical aviator. Like I posted this thing on my Instagram and I stole it from an Army guy. Like it shows this 17th century sort of effete French, guy with the ruffle sleeves and the wig and this, and it says aviation. And then on the bottom, below that, it says infantry. And it shows these like peasants tilling the field and doing all that kind of stuff. And I laugh at that because I'm no hard guy. Like I'm your typical aviator. Like I like my creature comforts. I like this. I'll come do whatever I got to do for you, but I'm no door kicker, but I've just had a great time, and is a crazy adventure. I've just had the worst time. So I've ended up, by virtue of shitty timing, ended up serving in 4 branches of the service and flying in 3, and it's just been cool.
That's just a wild ride, man. I think it's just another unique career that people can look at and go, hey man, maybe the military is not what I've always heard, because everybody has different, two people can join under a flight contract 1 month apart from each other, and they'll have vastly different careers just because of different things that are happening and what happens within their own sphere of influence and stuff like that. So,
I've talked to a lot of my daughter's friends who went in the military or thought about it. I've always been honest about it. I'm like, it's great. It's fun. It's awesome. But I also never lie about what the purpose of the military is. And I had a lot of kids wanting to join in the middle of the war. So I said, you understand you're joining the military of war, right? Like this isn't, this isn't like go to Hawaii and be on the beach. Like you may be stationed in Hawaii, but guess what? You'll spend out of the next 3 years, maybe a year there. And the rest of the time you're going to be somewhere else. either training or deployed. So
for sure.
But I recommend it. You know, I mean, as a career, it's an amazing career. It's not for everybody. So I don't think people should do it who aren't interested. But if you're interested in it, it was everything I wanted it to be and more. Looking back on it, I mean, sure, I have some scars from it, and I have some not so good memories, and you know, there's a lot of really good people that I got to know that aren't here anymore. But that's in life. That's in any profession.
Yeah.
So
That's the signs of a life well lived. You know what I'm saying? If you don't come out of something that's a wild ride without any kind of scars, physical or emotional. It's just how it is.
But it's been great. I'd recommend it to anyone, and you know, I appreciate people like you to let me tell my story a little bit, because
yeah, man.
Sometimes I feel, you know, I struggle, you know, as an actor. It's weird because you're sort of supposed to promote yourself a lot, right? And I don't do as much of it as I should in that regard. You know, I've had some successes. I've been on a couple of TV shows. I'm in a movie that's coming out with Kate Beckinsale and Brian Cox. So, you know, I'm making some progress, but you know, I struggle with this, but then I feel like I have an interesting story. Like I know my trajectory is unique. So to get on podcasts like yours and get to be able to talk about it and stuff is kind of cool. You know,
yeah, man.
And sometimes I wonder if like some of the other guys you have on to listen to it and go, what'd this guy do? You know, he's just a pilot who did this, that, and the other, but whatever.
No, dude, no one thinks that. And if they do, fuck them. You know what I'm saying? I don't think anybody, especially the guys that have done the most that have come on my podcast, would say anything like that. I think they'd be the complete opposite, because they get it. Like I said before, you know, it takes all of us to make this machine work. Like nobody is one like self-contained whatever, you know, they don't have the ability to take care of all of it on their own or be badass on their own. So I don't think that's a thing at all. And I like we talked about, I think before we started recording, is I even have that, like, who am I to even be the host of this show? You know, who am I to like be the one to try to relate to a Delta operator that's gone, you know, a million crazy ass direct action missions and stuff. But we all have to understand what we did was, you know, our part. And no more, no less.
Well, one thing I've found is platforms like yours, like people, they don't like it. They lap this stuff up. Like they just want to hear this stuff because it's so outside their what they normally do in lives. I mean, yeah, military guys listen to it, but I'm willing to bet at least 50, if not more, % of your listeners are not military. You know I mean?
Yeah, I'm not even sure.
I mean, you know, and I did one Combat Stories with Ryan, the host, is an awesome dude, and he told me, yeah, of course the special operators, the tier 1 guys, that's where he gets the most, because he tracks his listeners and views and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, yeah, they get the most, but I mean, he did it because he wants to hear everybody's stories, just like yours.
Yeah.
And I mean,
he's got a really good show.
I love listening to your podcasts and the others because I want to hear from these guys, because I want to hear from these tier 1 guys when they talk about, because I've flown over these hits. I've been in support of them, listening on the radio, you know, I've done, but I want to know what happened on target. You know what I mean? And then I love talking to guys, and I'm like, I'll be like on a podcast. I'm like, I think I was there.
Yeah.
I think, or I was, or we were around. That was the same time I was deployed, So it's just really cool. But people love this stuff, who just never served in the military, and
Well, it's like everything else. People have interest in different industries and hearing different stories. And again, I'm completely humbled that people like yourself and some of the other great guests I've had have come on the show and chosen to come and talk. Tell their stories here or on a show like Combat Story. Ryan's got a great show over there. I kind of saw his show after I started mine as I was researching guests, and it's a very similar kind of show, so people ought to check his out too. I'm all about supporting other people within the community and stuff. Where can people find you at, man? Are you on Instagram or social media that you want to put out there?
You can look me up by name, and you'll find me probably on Facebook. Yonel Dorelis, or my Instagram is YDorelis underscore. YogiFly underscore YDorelis.
All right, man.
And that's it. I don't have any products to sell. I don't have any. I'm just happy to be here. Appreciate the time. I enjoyed it, and hopefully I wasn't too much of a buffoon.
No, man, it was great. I enjoyed it. I like having pilots come on and talk, just because it's a different perspective. I spent my time on the ground. I've worked with a lot of pilots as a JTAC, obviously, but it's always interesting.
I love JTACs. I've spoken to so many JTACs and so many.
It was a fun job, man. It was hard to complain,
I'll give you one good JTAC story. We went on a mission. The Brits were hitting an objective, and unfortunately, I had a crash on the objective. I don't know if the aircraft was shot down or what, but so they were trying to get us in there, and the guys they had info were in a fight. So it was a pretty chaotic situation, and the JTAC was Scottish, right? I'm telling you, like, the two flight back and forth, we're like, what'd he say? What'd he say?
Yeah, they have some fake accents in Scotland.
Give us directions. He's like, east to west. I don't have your visual yet. We were just like, oh my God. But it was a lot going on, and we couldn't tell him to slow down because, there was a lot going on, and couldn't see the LZ. We had to have an AC-130 burn the LZ for us with their lights so we could see under the goggles. But man, I remember, I was like, I don't understand what he's saying. We're like, did he say this? Did he say that? We got in there and we got the guys out who needed to get out. And, unfortunately we took some heroes out with us too. But that was crazy because it was one of those chaotic things. And I'm like, dude, but I've spoke to so many JTACs. And then when I worked as a contractor at Green Flag in Nellis. So I learned a lot about 9 lines, JTAC 9 lines, CAS 9 lines and stuff.
Yeah.
So I got to see it from that perspective as well. So I learned a lot.
It's a good gig, man. Job. It's tough on our end too, because sometimes you'd get NATO aircraft and, obviously the standard is English, but English and quotes when you get someone from like France or something like that, it's, English is a second or maybe even third language for them. It's not always the smoothest communication, but that's part of the job,
It's tough, man, because I'll tell you, things look different from the air.
For sure.
And I'm not high. I'm at probably, between, 100 and 1,000 feet, right? And you're telling me, look for this, look for that. And I'm like, I think I see that tree line. Is that tree line he saw? So I can't imagine what it's like when you're really trying to direct a guy and drop some ordnance, and you're trying to call a road or a tree line, because you're seeing this big road that's barely a line for him. Because even at, from my perspective, it was tough. So, when they call us in, we do ECAS sometimes with the JTAC, come in and do our gun patterns and stuff. Using the references, I'd be like, I don't know what I don't look at my, what he's talking about? Yeah, I think that's it over there. All right, well, we'll find out. So
it's a fun game, man. It was a good job. It's stressful, but it's like very satisfying. Like when everything comes together for a good attack, So, but I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. People can find, because my dog is about to go crazy again. I think.
No worries, man.
I don't want to knock my camera over again. Everybody can find my stuff, jkramergraphics.com, at Former Action Guys, at Former Action News on Instagram, and go over to patreon.com, support the show, become a donor. And that's it, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Justin, thanks a lot.